Happy New Year and welcome back to Speducation. I am your host, Brandon Reed, and if this is your first time to the channel, a special welcome to you. Well, it's a new year and we've got all new topics to talk about. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. Today's lesson, common misconceptions about special education. Now, when people talk about special education or they think of it, there are some misconceptions that go along with it. And a lot of those misconceptions would be wrong. So, what are they? Well, there are many. But today, we're only going to talk about 5 of them. So, without further ado, let's dive into the top 5 misconceptions about special education. Misconception number 1, you can tell a student has a disability just by looking at them. This is probably one of the biggest misconceptions, and it kind of comes off as a little prejudice in a way, even though you may not be meaning to do that. But looking at somebody and thinking, "Wow, that person, yeah, they are in special ed." That's kind of hypocritical in a sense, or it's kind of, like I said, prejudice a little bit because you don't know whether an individual has a learning disability or not. Now, it's true, there are those individuals that have Down syndrome or maybe even cerebral palsy that do require special ed services, but the vast majority of students that are in special ed, you'd never know were in special ed unless you actually knew them or you were familiar with them. So to assume that somebody's in special ed just by looking at them is just wrong. Misconception number 2, kids who get special education services have to be in separate classrooms. Okay, did separate but equal not teach us anything, people? It doesn't work, and especially in special education. So the reason that we have students that are pushed into the general ed setting is because eventually one day these kids are going to grow up and they're going to go out into the real world. And if they don't have those social emotional skills, if they don't understand how to interact with people that are different than them, they're going to have a rough life. So that's why it's always important to try to push those students into the general ed classroom. Now, it is true that there are some students that do require separate learning facilities or separate classrooms. Typically, those are students that are on uh, our life skills students, certificate of completion. That's the word that I was looking for. So they will graduate, but they won't get a diploma. They'll get a certificate of completion. And the reason why they're in separate classrooms is because when they do grow up, they're going to need a lot of services. So that's why it's always important to just not assume that if a student is in special needs, that they have to be in a separate classroom, because that's just not true. Misconception number 3. When a student requires special education services, it is because they have trouble with academics. Actually, special education services can be provided to any student that has a disability, as long as that disability adversely affects their academic performance. Now, you're probably wondering, well, you just said it right there, academics. Well, that's true, but not every student that is getting F's and D's in math and language arts have a problem with math and language arts. It might be something related to focus. It might be something related to organization or social emotional problems. Whatever the disability is affecting their academic performance. It's not necessarily that they're bad at math or bad at language arts. It just means that whatever the disability is making it hard for them to get good grades in those classes, if that makes sense. Now, if they have a specific learning disability in math or language arts, then yes, it's really tied into their academics. But not all disabilities are specifically for academics. Some of those disabilities just affect those academics. Misconception number 4. Kids who receive special education will be labeled forever. Although it is true that if you have an IEP, that goes in your permanent record, but then again, so do your grades, your GPA, or basically anything that you did in high school goes into your permanent record. However, if you don't want somebody to know that you have a learning disability, here's a simple trick. Don't tell them, okay? A lot of people, when they hear that you were in special education, have misconceptions, as we just said. But it's really up to you, because if you had a learning disability when you were younger, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same learning disability when you get older, okay? Because again, part of the thing about humans is that we grow and we adapt. I mean, I used to be terrible with math, but now I help out students in math courses, and it's because of the help I received. So whenever you say, well, they're going to be labeled forever, just keep in mind that a label means nothing unless you give it power over you. Misconception number 5. Only special education teachers teach students with learning disabilities. There's an old saying, and the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. And the same thing goes for special education. Special ed teachers are great people. They're true heroes, in my opinion. But then again, I'm biased because I am one. However, special ed teachers can't do it all. And that's where the general ed teachers come in. So if you are a general ed teacher or you're studying to become one, then you have to take special ed courses when you're in college. You don't have to take a lot, but you do have to take some so that you understand how to teach students with learning disabilities, how to differentiate instruction, because you're going to have them in your classroom. So even though you may not be a special ed teacher, you can teach students with learning disabilities. So hopefully that clears up some things for you and it clarifies some of those misconceptions. But you're probably wondering, what are we going to be learning about next week? Well, next week's lesson is push-in services versus pull-out services. What is the difference and why is it important? Well, tune in next week and you'll find out. And if you liked what you saw, please click the like button. And if you want updates on future videos, feel free to click the subscribe button and ring the bell for updates on future videos. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to post in the comments and make sure to share this channel with others. And until next time, class dismissed.